Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Tuesday, August 30th, and I hope you all are having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world. So stay tuned. As always, I'll start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we're going to go over to Alan, where he's going to speak with G. Rittenhouse, CEO at Sky High Security, where G will update Techstrong TV on what Sky High Security has in store for post-McAfee, as well as speaking on a variety of tech trends and issues. Next, Alan will speak with Mav Turner, Senior Vice President of Product at Tricentis. In this interview, Alan and Mav will talk about how DevOps unicorns are all in on AI for testing and monitoring software automation. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on to tell us more about some of the upcoming webinars. Then we go to RSA, where Mitch met with Chief Security Architect and Intel Fellow Ron Perez to discuss how confidential computing helps enhance the security and privacy of an organization's data. Also at RSA, we have an interview between Mitch and Illumio CTO and co-founder PJ Kerner, where the two discuss the latest findings from Illumio and ESG's Zero Trust Impact Report, the industry's first research on zero trust strategies and the business impact of segmentation technology. We then have an episode of View with Vizard, where Mike interviews Matthew Trifero, CMO of Vapor.io, where Matthew explains why there will be data centers everywhere soon. Then we go to the Open Source Summit, where Alan met with VP of Security at Anchor, Josh Brushers, to discuss the company's two main open source projects, as well as how it shifted its focus from vulnerabilities to broader supply chain issues. And finally, we go back to RSA one more time, where Alan interviewed Gil Garone, CPO and co-founder at Orca Security, to discuss shift-left approaches and security testing. And that's what we have on here on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for August 30th. First up, Meta has proposed to settle a long-running privacy class action lawsuit related to the Cambridge Analytica scandal. The suit, which accused Facebook of illegally sharing user data with Cambridge Analytica, has been stuck in discovery for the past 4 years due to legal troubles. That being said, a filing was submitted on Friday, which asked the judge to put the class action on hold for 60 days until the lawyers for both Facebook and the plaintiffs complete a written settlement. The size of the proposed settlement has not yet been disclosed. Next, NASA scrubbed yesterday's Artemis 1 launch, the first mission in its program to get humans on the moon again by 2025, on accounts of an engine setback. After a weather delay, technical difficulties arose during the fuel loading stage, and at T-minus 40 minutes, the team was unable to get past an engine bleed. NASA plans to launch during the backup window that opens on Friday, September 2nd at 12:48 p.m. Eastern Time. If the launch is successful, the mission will last for 39 days and will splash down in the ocean on October 11th. In other news, Microsoft and ByteDance are collaborating on an AI project. Engineers from both companies recently announced that they are working together on a software intended to help companies more efficiently run AI apps on multiple computers. While companies oftentimes partner up and share resources to contribute to open source projects, this partnership emerges from a time where there's a growing rivalry between the US and China as far as AI and intellectual property is concerned. However, this is not the first time that Microsoft and ByteDance have sought to work together. In 2020, Microsoft briefly talked with ByteDance on acquiring TikTok, but ultimately the deal fell through. Next, LG and Honda announced that they will be investing $4.4 billion in a joint venture in the US to produce batteries for Honda's electric vehicles. The joint venture is set up to be later this year, and construction of the plant is expected to begin in early 2023. The plant will produce batteries exclusively for Honda vehicles assembled in North America. With demand for electric vehicles expected to grow from concerns about climate change, pollution, and increasing gas prices, Honda is just another one of the world's automobile makers looking to bolster up its EV lineups. Next up, Google has announced a new cross-device software development kit that contains tools to make apps play across Android devices, and eventually non-Android devices including tablets, TVs, and cars. The software development kit is meant to let developers discover nearby devices, establish secure connections, and host the app's experience across multiple devices. According to Google, the kit uses a combination of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and ultra-wideband technologies to deliver these functionalities. Currently, the kit is only available in a developer preview and works with Android phones and tablets, but it will eventually support other devices, including non-Android operating systems. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at transparency concerns that arose relating to LastPass's recent security breach. LastPass revealed that hackers stole part of its source code, and that announcement raised several concerns about the lack of oversight and transparency of these type of companies. This article takes a deep dive into these concerns. On Container Journal, we have an article compiling a list of the many great open source cloud native tools for you to use. From CI/CD to cloud native networking, we have compiled a list for almost anything you would ever want to do. To check out the list, head over to Container Journal. And finally, on DevOps.com, we have an article looking at OpenText's announcement that they will acquire Micro Focus for $6 billion. OpenText has stated its acquisition is a part of an effort to reinvigorate its portfolio of information management, application development, and cybersecurity platforms. The combined company would be a software powerhouse, enabling organizations to accelerate their business transformation initiatives using a set of API-centric offerings. The acquisition is expected to close in the first quarter of 2023. To learn more, go to DevOps.com. And that's it for today's Techstrong News Recap.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to a Techstrong TV interview or another Techstrong TV interview. I'm really happy to have our next guest on here. I've been looking forward to having him on. Let me introduce you to G. Rittenhouse. G is the CEO of Sky High Security. Sky High Security, who are they, you say? Good question. G's going to tell us all about it as well as his own background. Hey G, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Thanks so much for the kind invitation.
My pleasure. So G, why don't we start with your background and then let's answer the question. Who is Sky High Security for those who are not familiar?
Yeah, well, so I grew up through the tech world, have a PhD in electrical engineering and computer science. I've always loved tech, but equally important is how tech really helps companies, social, et cetera. So I really like the impact of technology as well as the technology itself. And when you combine those two things, inevitably your career ends up in security because of all the innovation that happens there. And of course, the ability to help others from that.
Absolutely. And look, I don't want to embarrass you, but you've held positions all the way back to Bell Labs, which is sort of, that's royalty in the tech world, right? That's the genesis of so much we do in tech today. In addition, you've held several executive positions at Cisco, including in the cybersecurity team there. And then, of course, you've been with Sky High now pretty much since Sky High was launched, just about 100 days ago.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
A fast 100 days.
Well, 100 days is right. It's whenever a new administration comes in Washington, right? The failure or success of that administration is often set in that first 100 days. Sometimes the same holds true in startup and the computer world. Gee, but we haven't given them the Sky High genesis, if you will. Why don't you share that, if you don't mind, with the audience?
Sure. So from those Cisco security days, a lot of security, although new, moves into the cloud. The approach may be a bit updated and whatnot, still kind of follows some basic principles around protecting data through intercepting packets and flows and things like that. And about 10 years ago, with really the introduction of SaaS applications and whatnot, you quickly realize that there's no kind of path to interrupt something or to put a box in there. And so, for example, if I took a file out of my cloud email and stuck it in a cloud storage application, like, how do you prevent that from happening? And so a technology was built at that time called a cloud access service broker. And Sky High Security was one of the key enablers of that. And quite frankly, we're one of the inventors of this industry. And from those early days, they got acquired by a larger company, McAfee. And earlier this year, we spun that out along with the rest of this cloud security portfolio that now forms the genesis of Sky High Security. And so while we're new as a company, the origins of the company actually go back about a decade in cloud native security for the modern enterprise.
Absolutely. And that's really the important thing I want people to understand here, is that Sky High might be a new name to them, but this is a tried and true foundation of security and security solutions that you're now building on. And,
yes.
It's something, it's not like taking a flyer on some new startup that just raised an A round or something like that, right? Now, so we were about 100 days in. As you sit here and look back on those 100 days, Jay, I guess the question is, have you achieved what you thought you would be able to do in 100 days? What else is out there? What's the next big kind of marks on the roadmap or the horizon?
Yeah, it's actually the team has been able to really accomplish a considerable amount, more than I thought we would be able to do. When you stand up a new company, there's a lot of just basic blocking and tackling, but the leadership team has really cleared a path to growth and market entry that was much faster than I gave myself credit for in those early days. The second thing that has happened is the brand and the name resonates with our customers. There's so many times it's like, Sky High, you're back. What happened over those last few years? We're so glad you're back in the market. And so there's a tremendous amount of excitement around the company and the brand and what we're doing. And then finally, I realized more than ever how important the problem we're trying to solve for our customers is. When you think about data security, when you think about insider threats and all these things, there's a lot of technology that comes to mind and a lot of acronyms. And our customers struggle with these things. And you realize that just having basic posture, basic policy, basic things like this to start and have that to adopt is just so powerful. And so we recognize the problem facing the industry, but I didn't anticipate the market reaction to it and just the excitement around the company and our offerings.
Yep. Well, look, we've both been in the security world a long time, and there was a long time in security where security had to fight for attention, had to fight for budget, had to, we were very much afterthought. We weren't even part of the IT organization, and still aren't in a lot of organizations, right? But certainly, in my world anyway, and where I sit, security is ascended, right? Security is truly top of the food chain now with so many organizations, because for not great reasons, right? Because we're seeing, whether it's with cloud native and software supply chains and SBOMs and all of that stuff coming out of government as well, and nation state activities, and for all the wrong reasons, security is more important than it ever was.
Yeah, I would say, actually, for the right reasons, security is more. But look, at its core, security is basically a data problem. And at its core, data is at the core of security. And for a modern enterprise, data is the heart of that modern enterprise. And so enterprises now think of their operations through that lens of data. So how to compute on it in the most reliable, cost-effective way, how to introduce it to their customers and provide value to the customers. And then, of course, security is just one of many different attributes surrounding that data for, of course, the reasons that you mentioned. But I think what has many people focus on this new world as being different in the intensity and the volume of the attacks. And as a result, security is a primary concern. But I actually think about it through the lens of that data is the most valuable asset of a company nowadays. And securing that data is one of many functions that any modern enterprise has to do for that. Whether through the threats that you mentioned or unintentional consequences of people leaving their credentials out there or clicking on a link or something. It's just the modern enterprise. And so I think security has risen in its stature just because of the value of the things that we protect.
Agreed. Look, you made a great point, G. To paraphrase an old politician or an old political campaign, it's all about the data, stupid. Right? we forgot that almost in the industry. We got so hung up with compliance and applications and the cloud. It is all about the data. And when we talk about the data, it's about data protection. Gee, I'd love to do this. This is a whole nother interview, actually, to talk about data and data security. Let's pick it up then. For now, though, for people who want to hear more about SkyHigh, where can we send them?
Go to skyhighsecurity.com. You can interact with the portfolio, see what we're doing. We'd love to have you.
Hey, congratulations on your first 100 days. We're going to have you back soon. We will continue this conversation.
Thanks. Looking forward to it.
All right, thank you. Hey, that G. Rittenhouse, CEO, SkyHigh Security. Check them out. We're going to take a break on Techstrong. We'll be back in a moment.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I am really happy to be joined all the way from Vienna, Austria today. Mav Turner of Tricentis. I should mention, Mav's not actually based in Austria permanently, but he's at the Tricentis offices there. Hey, Mav, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Thanks for having me, Alan. Looking forward to the conversation. And as you said, I am in Vienna, but I'm actually based in Austin, Texas. And there I lead product management for Tricentis and try to figure out what it is that we need to do in the future, what we're going to build, buy, partner. What's the best way to make sure that our customers have the full set of solutions to go solve their problems, right? And make sure we're listening to the customers, understanding what they're trying to do, and then build our strategy around that. And for those of you who may not know, Tricentis is a leader in the test automation market, and that's what most people know us for. But frankly, we've grown a lot in the last several years, not only with test automation, but test management, performance engineering. So really trying to cover that full life cycle and everything that's important in ensuring a continuous quality story for people that are building, deploying, managing applications.
Absolutely. And I just feel obligated to mention that also Tricentis is our sponsor for DevOps Unbound, our bi-weekly, actually every other week, bi-weekly. It's every other
It means two different things. It means twice a week and every other week. Right. So it's one of those things that's always tricky.
Well, bi-weekly means twice a week. I forgot what the right, whatever. It's every other week. DevOps Unbound. Check it out. And we spend about 45 minutes talking about all kinds of relevant topics in DevOps, and been lucky to be working with Tricentis going on 2 years now with that, and it's one of my favorite shows. Anyway, though, Mav, we're not here to talk about DevOps Unbound. We're actually here to talk about a recent survey that the folks at Tricentis did, and well, why don't you tell them about it? It's kind of your survey.
Yeah, sure. So we partnered with Techstrong to run this survey, and I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's very important for us is to constantly understand what our users, what our customers are doing, where they're struggling, how their needs are changing, and what they're seeing. And we were able to survey about 2,600 DevOps practitioners, and this spanned a wide variety of roles and industries. But we're asking about their AI augmented DevOps processes, right? So we wanted to understand how they were using AI, were they using AI to help with their processes, and to see whether or not that was something they were already impacting or they were just thinking about it. And to come straight to it, Alan, I was frankly really surprised that the large number, an overwhelming majority, said they were already seeing value from AI-powered DevOps processes, and were already expecting even further benefits pretty near down the path. Now, normally, when this, technology trends kind of takes a while for them to really have value and have impact, but we're seeing this, I think, happen much faster than we typically do with new technologies. We're seeing the value of that. That's what the responses to the surveys indicate, and it was really interesting to see that they're already seeing some of that data.
Mav, I agree with you. And I mean, there were two things that sort of surprised me with that. One is, look, and like you, right? We both talk to a lot of people, and we have a lot of friends. We've been in this business a long time. There are a lot of people who give you that AI is bullcrap, right? AI is not real. Machine learning, maybe, but not AI. And it'll be something in the future, but it's not anything right now. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. Well, you know what? Maybe it's real. Number one, it's real. Number two, like you said, usually in technology, new technologies tend to run the hype cycle and go into the trough of disillusionment in Gartner lingo before you really get into that promised land of, hey, it works and it adds value, right? The hype generally.
Yeah, the plateau of productivity till you actually start using it.
Plateau of productivity.
But I think what we're seeing, I'm not denying that there's not a lot of hype. It's a double negative. There is a lot of hype around AI, but there is also real productivity gains. There's real world uses that are working that I think are reflected in the survey results. People don't lie when they, I hope not anyway, when they
do these surveys.
There's no incentive for them to.
Yeah, there's no reason for them to. So, and that's encouraging. Now, two main areas that I think in the survey and the research kind of focused in on where AI is starting to have that impact. One is testing.
Yep.
Certainly, right? We're seeing, with the amount of automated testing that's being done, and Tricentis is one of the leaders there, right? With the amount of automated testing that's being done, it kind of is a no-brainer that you should be doing, AI kind of stuff. And then secondly was in monitoring, I believe.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And a lot of those things that those two domains share in common, and the reason why we think that people are already seeing value out of this today. I mean, we said, I think 70% of respondents said that the potential of AI augmented testing is as extremely or very valuable, is because if you look at the concepts of AI and machine learning, it's really based around having large sets of data to train on, right? And then having that model be created and then deploying that model in a way that allows you to get benefit. When you have very small data sets or data sets that are very unique or niche, it's kind of hard to get that pattern recognition. So it's almost the ideal technology application of AI and ML is in this testing and the monitoring because of the amount of data that gets generated. So it's not even just the number of tests, it's the amount of data we get back from that test and what we do with it, how we parse the responses and how we go forward with it. And I think one of the other interesting trends with that ability to parse that data, bring it back, is also what are the tasks that we can automate and repeat, right? We have all this video and training content that we can pump into these machine learning models to try to understand how a user would behave, right? And we can watch these things, and therefore then we can play them back and automate them versus creating a manual test creation and clicking through a UI. We can see how users are actively using this at scale, particularly for web apps, and then create new models around that, and then run those models through the application and pretend to be a user, right? And so there's a lot of really powerful applications here because of the volume of data that gets created, which is why AI tends to be such a powerful tool. But at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's a part of the thing, right? A lot of people want to lead with the AI story. You're talking about this earlier, right? AI. But really what we usually talk to customers about, what business problem are you trying to solve? Let's focus on that. And then we'll find the right tool and right process to help make things easier for you, frankly.
Agreed, 100%. So, I always try, obviously, I don't want to say we were surprised at the acceptance and use of AI, but, clearly that was a trend in there. What else in the survey, Mav, kind of caught your eye as well? Maybe counterintuitive, or you were surprised at the result?
Yeah, one of the things when we look at the unicorns from a maturity perspective, right? These organizations that really figured this out and are really executing on it well. And we look at them as a cohort. We see that they're the ones that actually have massive benefit compared to others. So it becomes this advanced tool. And one of the things that when we look at the data, we say, are you building your own data warehouse? Are you building your own tools? Are you partnering? Are you pulling with a vendor things off the shelf? And that's where I think it becomes really interesting, because a lot of these more mature unicorns, they invest more in building a data science team. They invest more in building out their machine learning capabilities or data centers to train their models, all the costs associated with that to try to eke out an advantage. But we rapidly see the ability to commoditize those at a vendor level, so we can just make that included in the product so that everybody can kind of benefit from that. So you don't all have to build your own data science team. You don't all have to train your own models. And I think that we'll always have a place for needing to have data science teams, particularly at a vendor level, but the ability of bringing that power down, not only to those very mature, highly capable organizations, but to everybody is frankly what we see as a big potential going forward, continuing to bring this technology down to everybody, even organizations that may not be as mature or maybe earlier on in their process of just implementing a DevOps process or trying to figure out, what do I do next, right? How do I go from where I'm at today to a little bit better and a little bit better, right? Every day I just need to get a little bit better. And when do I bring in new technologies and not say, okay, we got to go hire this new staff to go build out this capability. We'll start out by learning about the technology, partnering with a vendor that makes it easy. And then maybe you decide you need to build out an advanced team and there's a business advantage to really honing that out. Or maybe decide that, we've eked out enough value from this approach. Let's look at some of the other options and some of the other challenges in our DevOps processes that we should be optimizing if we can partner with the right vendors there.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something, it's not So it is a question of DevOps maturity, as you said, right? People who have more experience in this. But there's also a big data issue, right? Where really for AI and some of these, similar technologies to really sort of, be really worthwhile and really hit their, productivity levels, you need a certain amount of data. And look, today we all generate tons of data, but you also need the ability to analyze that data analysis, which yields the insights that AI, kind of can use to help. And I think that's where, as you mentioned, as vendors can learn to boil that down and create solutions that you don't need a big data studio team or a data lake, data scientists, fishing the data lake to get that information. I think that's a barrier to smaller, not unicorn level organizations who, my experience, Mav, is no one raises their hand and says, I want to be a laggard, right? I want to be the slow person. I want to be the last of my competitors to adopt this. Everybody wants to, right? Use the greatest tools that yield the greatest, performance, but they just don't have the resources, right?
Yeah, Alan, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that that's something that really is key here, where again, you want to be able to make that technology accessible and quickly accessible. And you say, all right, if you go back to kind of a couple of decades around machine learning and AI and some of these concepts, one of the common topics we talked about was knowledge discovery from data, right? KDD, there's a bunch of KDD conferences. And you can say that's really what you're trying to accomplish in a lot of this, right? So there's different ways with AI where you talk about, we want to be able to create automation from monitoring a user's behavior and then go create a little robot that goes and repeats that behavior. But the other side of that is we've got all this data. How can we get some knowledge from this data versus I'm a tester. I run all my tests and now I get a billion rows of data back. And I'm like, what do I need to extract from this? It's interesting and valuable. And what should I do based on this response and this data? And I think that aspect of this is super important to understand, which is you can leverage AI to do that anomaly detection. You can leverage AI to do the anomaly detection and recommendations on what to do next. And so a lot of these technologies, like I said earlier, are really primed because there's so much data to sift through. And that's where a lot of them really shine. And so to me, that's whether you're a mature organization or not, you need some basic tooling to get through this mountain of data and say, what should I do with this? And that's where a lot of these technologies can really empower, frankly, a lot of these users and help mature somebody who is kind of lower on that curve that bumps them up a notch. But even the people that are more mature, now they can focus on something else. And that's another theme that I really like to talk about, right? We're not trying to replace people necessarily. We're trying to augment them, right? We're going to take this off your plate so you can go work on something else that we can't take off your plate. So we're constantly learning and growing and trying new things. And the better we can augment a task that it's kind of defined, the more very specific value that human can provide. And so to me, the story of AI is always a story of augmentation more than replacement, because even if we take a lot of the repetitive tasks off your plate, great, now I can focus on other things. And that tester or that developer, I mean, you look at some of the things like Copilot, right, for GitHub, like it's not to replace a developer, it's to augment them and help them go faster and focus on other things. And I think that's where you see a lot of really interesting capabilities here, where people get kind of scared of AIs are going to come take my job. No, it's going to allow the human to go into other tasks and to use this as another tool, just like calculators and computers, Excel workbooks have through time, right?
Absolutely. Matt, unfortunately, we keep these interviews at 15 minutes or so. I'd like to talk to you more about it, but I want to make sure we put out here for folks out here who want to maybe see the full report and analysis of the survey. Where can we send them? Is it just off the front page of Tricentis?
Yeah, we can definitely get some links for y'all there. They'll be featured on Tricentis. I know these videos live for a while though, so someone who watches this later,
we'll try to get it in the notes.
For people watching this live, well, not live, we recorded it, but for people watching this, late August, early September 2022, if you go to the front site, the front page of the Tricentis site, we should have them up there, and if not, look in the notes for a URL. Hey, Mav, I want to thank you. I know it's late afternoon now. I want to thank you for coming on Techstrong TV and joining us. Look forward to having you back on here because I know you, not to change subjects, but we're going to change subjects. I know you guys have several announcements between now and the end of the year, hopefully.
Absolutely. Lots of fun stuff cooking.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all about it.
Great. Thanks, Alan. I really appreciate the time today. It was great to have a great discussion.
It's great to have you on. Mav Turner, he runs products over at Tricentis, coming at us from Vienna today. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. First, tomorrow, Tuesday, August 30th at 11 a.m. Eastern, join our expert panel on DevOps.com with another edition of DevOps Unbound. This episode, a report on AI-augmented DevOps. Now you won't want to miss this conversation with Clint Sprague from Tricentis and Kosuke Kawaguchi, creator of Jenkins and co-CEO of Launchable. Following that, at 1 p.m. Eastern, Security Boulevard is hosting CISO Talk Masterclass, episode Catch Lightning in a Bottle. Now this series wraps up as we connect the dots from episodes 1 through 5 and discuss the reality that no plan is up to date or perfect, and new approaches to incident response are created when security incidents actually occur. So if you'd like to keep up with what's going on here at Techstrong Learning, feel free to follow us at any of our socials. We can be found on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you're not on social media very much, just go flip through our catalog of upcoming events and join us for a workshop that we've got coming up. So that is all I have for you today. But we do have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs waiting for you over here at Techstrong Learning.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
With the great pleasure of being joined by Ron Perez, who's Intel Fellow, Chief Security Architect with Intel. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think you're my first Intel Fellow that I've had an interview with.
Well, we're a dime a dozen these days.
Yeah, are you? Okay. I didn't know. But I'm glad you're here with us either way. Well, tell us about you. You don't become an Intel Fellow overnight. I'm sure you've done a lot of very interesting and challenging things through your career. If you can kind of give us just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's taken me maybe around 3 decades now to get to this place, right? But yeah, a lot of experience, right? I've only been at Intel though for the last 5 years. Right, focusing, as we've talked about, on data center security mainly, right, but also any security technologies more broadly. That's where the Chief Security Architect title comes in, right? Have responsibilities across all of our business units, all of our technologies, right, for the security technologies that we're putting into our products, right. But before then, right, I had many years of experience at IBM Research, right, T.J. Watson Research, at AMD, at Motorola, right, and a few other places along the way.
You've been around the hardware universe for quite a while.
Yeah, I keep trying to. I'm a software guy by education, let's say, right, and I've been trying to get away from hardware, right, for almost 30 years now, right, and it keeps kind of pulling me in. But I enjoy it, right. You get to really see where where the rubber hits the road, really, right? Where that software and hardware come together.
Now we love to talk about cloud and all things that have moved to the cloud. Guess what's underneath all those clouds? Computers, storage, all kinds of hardware things, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your work in security. You were talking before about data at rest, data in motion, data being computed on. Tell us a little bit about what your work is.
Yeah, I think since I have been in the industry for a long time, right, and most of that has been in security, at least like the last couple of decades, let's say. The thing that I've seen that has been the most exciting, right, in the recent years, let's say the past decade, right, has been the emergence of what's now called confidential computing, right, in terms of a real paradigm shift in security, right, computer security, where a lot of the work that was established back in the 60s and 70s, actually 1960s and 1970s, right, with Orange Book and the DoD space, right, that was kind of the beginnings of everything we know about security today, right? And there has been a few things that have happened to really shift the paradigm a little bit in that time frame, right? But really now with confidential computing, this ability to no longer look at the entire stack, computing stack, from the hardware up to the application layer, and then to say, well, if I need to really trust my application and need to know what it's doing, I also have to trust all the software underneath it, right? The operating system, the hypervisor, the hardware, and everything else, right? But with confidential computing, that basically says, look, all you have to trust is your software, your data, and the underlying hardware, right? The rest of the software on the system is there to help make forward progress, right? But it can't access your data, it can't see your secrets, it can't modify your data, right? It can't change your computation, and you get verifiable evidence of all of that, all of those nice security properties directly from the hardware. So that's pretty powerful when you take it now to a cloud computing environment, which is all about computing in a shared space, right? Shared computing environment. So.
It's just funny how those, I began my career back in school in the 70s, began back in the 80s, and some of those same paradigms, people say, oh, we used to do just that, very similar things. Yeah. Some of the same concepts have obviously rolled forward and evolved and gotten more sophisticated too. It's always an interesting conversation about how do we protect data in memory, how do you protect data, but also it sounds like you're talking about protecting data while it's being computed upon, while it's inside, rolling around inside the chips, the firmware, software that's happening inside of that. So that sounds like you're talking about sort of protection of data, almost protective memory while it's active and being used.
Yeah, think about what we usually mean, right? And we talk about computer security, about protection, right? There's usually a component of encryption in here, right? Because that's the mathematical way to offer some security guarantees or assurances, right? There's a lot of other things you do with access control and everything else, but usually encryption is at the heart of it. We certainly see that for protection of data at rest, right? Where we have self-encrypting drives and really nice storage encryption capabilities, right? And so obviously the security relies all on the key at that point, right? Same with network security, right? It's all about TLS, SSL, right? IPsec, right? All these nice security protocols that all utilize encryption to a great degree. Now we're talking about how do you protect data in memory when it's being computed on in a server in a cloud or on some device hanging off a telephone pole that's talking to your car, right? Maybe in a potentially hostile environment. How do you actually provide that same level of protection, right? Traditionally, we've done that through operating systems that have provided separation, right, of the execution environment. But confidential computing really takes it, the next level beyond. It talks about encrypting the data in memory, right, so that it's always encrypted in memory. It's only decrypted when the processor has to operate on it. And again, right, that allows you to say that now all I have to rely on is the hardware that's providing that capability, that encrypted memory capability, and the software that you're running in this environment. I don't have to worry about the operating system or anything else anymore.
Interesting. So we're not relying on the OS to establish the boundaries of protected memory.
That's right.
Across different applications, user spaces, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So the operating system now, or in a hypervisor, right, in a cloud environment or virtualized environment, its whole responsibility is to make sure that that unit of compute makes forward progress, that it gets scheduled, right? It can't look into what's inside that environment anymore. It can't modify it. All it can do is stop it from running, right? So you still have denial of service, right? But you no longer have a confidentiality or integrity, issue to worry about.
It hasn't been manipulated, changed, or even accessed, I guess, if it's being protected.
Yeah, even access, right. Only the software that's supposed to access the data can access the data, right? And the hardware directly offers those assurances.
I'll ask the thermometer in the room question. How does it know? How does it know what should be accessing that data?
So with the technology that Intel invented before I got here, right? So I'm not just touting my own work, right? Called software guard extensions, or SGX, right? That was really the inspiration for what we now call confidential computing. And there are other solutions coming out even from our competitors, right? So nice to see the industry following suit. But SGX, right, the software guard extensions technology, its approach was probably the boldest, the most aggressive, right? It really tried to say, can we, by through pure instructions, right, hardware instructions, can we provide the capabilities for the software to create this secure computing environment? And from then on, right, the hardware itself understands, right, the context, right, that the software is executing in, and it will provide the separations, and of course it provides the encrypted memory support, right? So all this is done, magically, right, by the processor, right?
Does this apply to persistent storage as well, or primarily, storage that can be gone once you're done?
Yeah, volatile memory.
Volatile memory.
Yeah, chiefly looking at volatile memory, right?
Okay.
Because that's what everybody's operates in normally, right? But as we're seeing the memory hierarchy start to evolve, right, to where you have, obviously you have caches, which is some form of memory on the processor itself. You'll have, maybe high bandwidth memory on the chip, right, which is sort of like an extended cache, right? Then you have main, DDR memory. And now you're starting to see non-volatile memories start to come into play too, right? Whether they're solid state based or, Intel has their own 3D crosspoint technology. And then finally, the last stage of that hierarchy is disk, right? Or used to be tape, right? In the days, but now it's disk, right? So SGX chiefly looks at, the memory that's being used actively, right? So that could be, caches, HBM, DDR. Yeah.
Interesting. So from if you're going to approach this from a security practitioner who maybe isn't into the hardware aspect of this, what are the things that they're going to be interested in that you're doing that they're going to care about most? And they're going to go to their cloud provider, they're going to go to their hardware provider and say, this is what I need and why.
I think what that community is going to be interested in, it's a broad community, right, starting with developers, is the development environment, right? So you're introducing new instructions or new capabilities in your processor, right? How do I take advantage of those as a developer? And that's where SDKs and other toolkits come into play. And there are, Intel, of course, have had an SDK for SGX, right, for many years now. But we're seeing a number of other open source efforts and startups and other companies, Microsoft and others, right, building environments that allow you to take an existing application, right, and kind of push a button and that wraps that application in a library OS, right? And now it's all packaged up, and as soon as it runs, it knows how to launch this secure computing environment, or what we call the trusted execution environment.
It reminds me of, there have been in different generations of chips, there have been capabilities built in that were kind of there and performing a function, but really took off when people figured out how to leverage it, like KVM, for example, to do virtual machines, things like that. It wasn't a brand new thing, but really exploded and took off. What are your hopes for what can happen once this technology is really embraced and people figure out not only what they can use it for, but maybe uses you've hoped that we might be able to exploit?
Well, so first I'll tell you, one use case that's really kind of inspiring too, right, for this confidential computing, and then I'll kind of come back to heterogeneous computing, because we've been talking mainly about CPUs, right? In our case, x86 CPUs, right? So the use case, right, that's really inspiring, right, that we're seeing a lot of traction with in terms of using this technology is around AI, right, machine learning, but more in the federated machine learning space. So federated machine learning, the idea is that you can't bring all the data together that you want to create a model from, right, or to do even inference on. Maybe because of regulation, maybe just because the data belongs to different parties, they don't trust each other, right? So you need to do the machine learning and the model training, right, at the sites, right, whoever owns the data, right? But you still want to benefit from, an aggregated model, right? Because you need more data to get a better model. federated learning, right, and Google and others have kind of really advanced the science, right, has allowed that to happen. The problem is now, right, that how do you know that that the model that I'm training is the right model, right? It's the right analytics that I'm running on my data. And if I'm the one who's going to aggregate the model in the end, how do I know that the data was really yours, right? So there's this verifiable aspect that you need, right? That confidence computing provides, right? It tells you this is the software I was using on this platform at this time, right? And under these assurances, right? And that's the statement that now you can say, yeah, all this data that I used was legitimate data. And then when I give back the model to the people who need to use the model, they also know that yes, this model was created with legitimate data, in an environment that I trust, right? So, and then this, this is kind of the technical aspect, but the inspirational aspect is this capability now leads to we've done different engagements with hospitals, right, in the healthcare space, and even in the kind of financial services space around anti-money laundering. These models are gold for them, right? This is really what advances their businesses, right? But it takes forever to do this without this security technology, right? This security technology now allows them to get the results that would normally have taken, like in some of the healthcare cases, 5 years to create a model, right? They can do in weeks or maybe months, just because of all the regulations they have to go through, right? But that allows them to, really speed up the time that they can, get the results they need.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like a supply chain integrity for data being computed on.
Yeah.
In a way.
That's a good example. And then the other piece that I mentioned before was, this is all about CPUs so far, right? But we're seeing, obviously, right, in the industry, computing environments become much more heterogeneous, right? You want to be able to, we talked about AI and machine learning, right? GPUs and other specialized hardware, right, are the trend today, right? Because they can really accelerate these capabilities. So what we're working on at Intel is how to extend this capability to these other devices, to these other computing environments, whether it's a GPU or a specialized accelerator, to maybe you have some compute in memory capability or compute and storage capability. How can you get those same confidence computing capabilities, right, in those other devices? And then how can you weave those all together so that you have one huge distributed workload that is now completely trusted, right, and verifiably trusted.
Interesting if you think about sort of blockchain and where GPUs are being used in an application like that, not just for gaming. We love gamers too. And maybe they can take advantage of this as well. But talking about financial transactions and medical imaging, all kinds of applications that are being run on non-traditional compute platforms as well as traditional. So. Yeah. And we've learned our lesson, I think, multiple times in the financial world. It's kind of the closer you can get to the event happening, whether that's shortening the length of the network cable to getting a data center closer to a trading platform or whatever that would be. Now we're talking about getting as close to the data that's happening in memory. Yeah. You want to be able to protect that. So the integrity of it, there's no unfair advantages if someone could exploit it in a way that we don't want it to be leveraged.
Yeah. And the value of the data itself may vary depending on its provenance, right? You want to know where and when the data was created. Was it created in a legitimate way, in a legitimate environment, right? Or in a geography, right? So if you're the German government, let's say, right, which is very particular about the privacy of their citizens, they may require that you can compute on the healthcare data for my citizens, but it has to be in Germany, right, within my national boundaries. We're seeing a lot of sovereignty issues, right, over data, and so these types of technologies can enforce that this technology or this data can only be computed on in these environments, and then it provides a verifiable statement afterwards that says yes, it was computed on this server that was running in Berlin, right, at this time of day or whatever.
What are some great resources for people that might want to read about SGX or SDKs that they can use to work with this technology?
Yeah, so Intel, of course, right, has a lot of information on our website, right? It's probably go to SGX or something like this on Intel's website, but there's a lot of information that you can find there. But I would say also that a good place to look more broadly at what's happening in the industry is the Confidential Computing Consortium, right? So it's an open industry initiative, right, where a lot of folks are collaborating under the Linux Foundation, right, and we're actually facilitating, additional toolkits and environments that help people use these technologies. Again, whether they're from Intel or our competitors, right, or even some of our partners, but really trying to increase the usage, right, by making it easier for people to use these technologies. And there's a lot of effort that developers especially can join in on some of these projects.
Excellent. I had no idea. I love the Linux Foundation. Had no idea they were working on this too. Well, Ron, it's really fascinating, and I'm sure glad you brought the Intel, the hardware, the technology, the security technology that you're working on. It's great to see that come to fruition. I imagine you put you and a lot of other people, a lot of hard work and dedication in your career to achieving some of these gains. So thank you for your work in this space.
It's a pleasure to talk about it. Yeah, pleasure to be with you too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Ron Perez, who is Intel Fellow, Chief Security Architect.
This is Techstrong TV.
Oh, the great pleasure of being joined by PJ Kerner. PJ is CTO, co-founder with Illumio. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Here, RSA.
Together.
Yes, together. And there's no Zoom screen between us, which is wonderful. But introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Illumio.
Yeah, so I'm one of the founders of Illumio. Illumio's mission is to prevent breaches from becoming cyber disasters. And like one way I like to think about it is, if you think about how submarines are built, right? Like, if there is, a breach of a submarine, you can shut off the compartments from each other, so the submarine doesn't sink. And so you have cyber resiliency. And the way that happens is through isolation and segmentation. So Illumio has built a zero trust segmentation platform, right? And that's how we sort of help our customers achieve that cyber resiliency.
Excellent, excellent. Well, very topical, zero trust and cyber resiliency. So tell us a little bit about, I know that you issued a report with ESG talking about zero trust, and it's a great topic. Everybody's talking about it, but everybody's also anywhere on the spectrum of their adoption and understanding to it, of just kind of coming to it, kind of figuring out what it means to them. Were there any particular things in the report and insights that you kind of gained from it you thought were either compelling to your customers, maybe even to you?
Yeah, I mean, there was a number of things. So first thing, maybe there are different philosophies on how to sort of achieve zero trust. You can take a outside-in philosophy that's like starting with the end user and working our way to the application, or you can take a inside-out approach. And an inside-out approach is focusing on your data, your applications, on your critical assets, and that's what we do. And obviously, you need both of those kind of things to make a good solution. So we did this report, and it's 1,000 people responded to it. It's across multiple countries. And one of the interesting things, so some of the other interesting elements of zero trust is an assume breach mentality, right? And so assume breach is you have to believe that the attacker is already on the inside, and when you have that mentality, you actually think about security in a different way, because they're already in the house, right? And so how do you sort of set up other barriers, other security controls, other monitoring to sort of protect them? But so we asked a very simple question in the research, or the researchers did, right? It was, do you think you're going to get breached? So one of the fascinating answers was there was 4% of the people who said we will definitely not get breached. I'm not sure who those 4% are. But there are 4% out there.
We could ascribe some labels to those 4% people, but yeah, okay.
So
I'm with you.
So then there was another 14% that said we will likely not be breached. Okay, so now they're like, and then there was a set of what I call fence sitters. There was 31%, so it's totaled up to like 47% or so, and that said we're not sure, right? So if you take it, half the people who said zero trust was important to their strategy haven't really internalized that mentality that's sort of needed to be successful.
Yeah, there's definitely a kind of fulcrum there. On the other side, where we are all going to be breached if we haven't already. We probably already have experienced something. Hopefully we know about it. It's as much about, yes, that happens, and how do you contain that, how do you respond to it. The whole process is for that. So it isn't just about prevention, because you can't prevent everything.
And one other interesting stat. Now, I wish we would have done this for years. I mean, Illumia was started with this idea of kind of how do we get to least privilege, right? Mm-hmm. And I think least privilege is one of those elements of zero trust. So we didn't start as a zero trust company because that wasn't even really around when we started, but we started with that philosophy in mind. So the report also sort of showed that while 90% of the people thought that zero trust was one of their top 3 priorities. So that was a pretty big number.
Those are important.
And when I sort of made the comment about inside out, outside in, and I think it was like 81% of those talked about needing to do zero trust segmentation as part of their their strategy for zero trust. So that was, we have, Illumia is growing business, and we've sort of seen that, but we didn't have any data,
Is it translating to the customer?
Yeah.
Are they adopting more than just the label, if you will, of zero trust?
And that's why if we want to repeat this kind of thing to sort of see the trends over years, and we can talk next year about what's changed from last year to this year, but it would have been great to sort of see it over the past 5 years, mm-hmm. but don't have that data today.
What do you think, setting the report as data aside for a moment, what do you hear from customers? What is their understanding of zero trust, and what does it mean for them to adopt it? Is there some pretty common understanding, like segmentation, for example, whatever industry you're in, or does it really kind of depend? I mean, if you're in financial services versus healthcare versus whatever, they have kind of a different flavor of it.
So zero trust is a misunderstood topic, and I do think people. So one of the challenges is it is a strategy, right? And a strategy. When you think of any strategy, it's probably a multi-year strategy. So mm-hmm. the question I think people mostly have is, well, what do I do first? Even if I know what the end goal is, right? Where do I start? Where do I start so I can be successful, on that journey? So I think that's the question people ask the most. How do I get going? And I think you have to start with the end in mind, but you also need to have prove some initial value, right? Wherever you sort of start with, like how have I reduced risk by adopting this zero trust strategy? Because you have to put different pieces of the puzzle together. Mm-hmm. Like there's no one vendor you get zero trust from. You have to. It's a way of thinking.
You don't want to wait till the very end of the journey and say, "Oh, there's the benefit," right? I mean, it's. You're increasing your ability to manage risk, respond to risk.
Well, and then sometimes there is projects when they take multi-years, then leaders sort of change. Like it is something you have to. The organization needs to adopt, right? It's not something that just one person can make happen, because there's an organizational change aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. It's funny, you and I were talking about being at RSA conference. I haven't been to a session yet, even though I'm talking at one tomorrow. There were the days when I'm sure like I did, you came and you went to a whole bunch of sessions and learned a lot of things from other people that way. In our roles, we oftentimes learn things from other people by these kind of conversations that don't make it to too many sessions. But there's still a vibe to RSA, and I get from colleagues like yourself. About where we are, what's happening in the industry, and RSA being a focal point where things come together. What's your kind of sense of what's happening in security at RSA today?
I think one thing, obviously we didn't have that face-to-face communication, so there's a lot more collaboration that's going on. I think there's a lot more energy in that collaboration. I think people are listening harder. You're like they're listening more intently. They're trying to get more out of that. Like we're working together, as an industry, as the vendors and customers, and I think that's great. So it's been exciting.
And that's consistent. What I've heard from other people is, it's almost like we need to continue up our game, and one of the ways we can do that is by working more closely and collaboratively together. It's not just one person's going to win at the expense of everyone else losing. We've got to do this together because we've got a lot of things that things we're fighting against as well. So any other things you picked up from either the report or talking with customers about zero trust you think might help someone who's on that journey trying to figure out either where to start or what the next couple of steps might be?
I guess one other quick thing was there was some interesting operational benefits, right? So because you think if you're doing there's always a cost to doing a security program, both whatever you're buying and then the people cost to implementing it. But for example, when people got visibility, because visibility is a key to providing segmentation. People got visibility, got other benefits out of it. There was a decrease of downtime, right, of applications because they were better segmented or people understood how the applications work better, and minimizing cost of troubleshooting. So there was a interesting side benefit, right? It was not the primary benefit, but a side benefit by actually having better hygiene about your applications and understanding what was going on. So that was
almost a resiliency benefit of having that better kind of lines of demarcation.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point because it's we tried to do cyber resiliency and you got you were really doing just general resiliency and you got other benefits out of that. It's a good way of thinking about it.
Interesting, because it's certainly a theme in software and of course cloud and network and the whole stack.
Absolutely.
Resiliency, we can't prevent every error just like we can't prevent every attack. So build very resilient systems and software stacks. Well, I'm excited to learn more about what's in the report. Love for other folks to be able to do that. Where can they find out more about that as well as Illumio?
Yeah, if people want to learn more, so we have a resource center on illumio.com and they can go there and find the report.
Great. I'm sure a lot of other good resources too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, PJ, it's been great to have you here, and good luck with the rest of the show. We look forward to our next conversation too.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Matt Trefero, who is CMO for Vapor.io, and we're talking about kinetic grids, and you may well wonder what that's all about. So I'm going to let Matt explain that, but there's at least 32 of them now and climbing, right, Matt?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the Kinetic Grid is the name of our product. It's a combination of networking and data centers that are built into metropolitan areas. You think about like a city the size of Los Angeles, we build data centers that are spread across the metropolitan area. We connect them with high-speed fiber. We then allow the full configuration of that for using our software-defined networking and our interconnection fabric. And the whole purpose of this is to deliver new classes of workloads to the enterprises and consumers and municipalities. The way to think about it is any workload that today is locked on premises can now be moved off of premises and delivered from the infrastructure with the same privacy, security, and performance as on premises, but with now the cloud economics, the consumption-based pricing, that sort of stuff. We work with all the cloud providers. We work with we're cloud neutral. We're carrier neutral. So we're one of the few places at the edge where those two entities can meet. And as you mentioned, we're customer ready in 32 cities. And what that means is we're live in 6. So the 6 cities we're live in are Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Dallas, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. And we're running customer workloads. We're live in those cities. Probably our most advanced city is Las Vegas. There's a lot of activity going down there. And we just announced that we brought another 26 municipalities up to what we call customer ready. And customer ready is our name for our just-in-time sort of production model, where we build our data centers in the factory. You can think of them like our smallest data centers, like the size of a UPS truck. It can fit in a parking space. Our larger ones are like the size of a shipping container. Our small ones are 20 kilowatts, and the large ones are like 160 or 180 kilowatts. And just-in-time means the data center can leave the factory, like in Phoenix, get trucked to the location. Maybe that takes 1 to 5 days. And once it's at the location, we can stand it up in 3 to 6 hours. And the reason we can do that is because we spent the last 5 years pulling permits, pouring foundations, trenching fiber laterals, bringing in the utilities, everything needed up to the point of just laying in a data center. So our promise to customers is that any of the municipalities that are on our list that aren't live today, we can have it live for you in 90 days typically.
Mm-hmm. And compare and contrast, if you would, if I wanted to replicate that same kind of capability using a public cloud service, what would be involved? How much time and effort would it require? And
well, today you can't. Yeah, today you can't exactly. Although the cloud providers are target customers of ours. And so as the cloud, today you think about Amazon, right? They started with 2 regions, US West and US East. And now they're deploying, I think they're up like to 12 to 16 local zones, which is sort of regional. And then the next step is like what we're doing with the Kinetic Grid, which is like very, very, neighborhood level. And just to give you some sense of like the timing, and our network can deliver to the premises within our geographic footprint, sub 100 microsecond latency. And that's microsecond, not millisecond. I think everybody else in the internet will tell you, we'll talk about millisecond latency. We can deliver 3 milliseconds or 5 milliseconds, but this is in microseconds. And we did that very intentionally to essentially operate it at land speeds so that you have this, it's as if the compute is actually on your premises, but it doesn't have to be.
And is the way we think about engaging with data changing, and is that part of the reason that we're seeing this shift here? Because it seems to me, at least, that there's more of an effort going underway to process data and analyze it at the point where it is created and consumed, rather than having all these round trips out to the cloud and back and hoping the WAN works, et cetera, et cetera. So are we kind of, in some ways, going back to the future, but we're just finding a different way to skin this latency cat?
Well, I mean, in a way, there's a lot of reasons for the edge, data being one of them, right? Data, especially now with 4K cameras with being the sensor of choice, generates voluminous amounts of information that is very expensive to ship back to the core, and it takes too much time to do real-time inferencing on that. So definitely the fact that data is being created out at the edge is a reason to have the compute out at the edge. It's a lot cheaper to move a 2 gigabyte application to operate on 10 terabytes of data than it is to move 10 terabytes of data to a small application. But the way to think about it, I think, is we talk about the Internet of Things, right? But the Internet of Things doesn't really exist today. Not really, not the way we imagine it. But we have the internet, and then we have the things. Right? And I think what edge computing really is the merger of the digital and the physical world, so that you can deliver all the complexity and scalability and performance of the cloud but right at the thing where it can operate directly, with the physical world. Whether it's driving a robotic lathe or analyzing real-time video cameras to make sure everybody on the construction site's wearing a hard helmet.
So do you think we'll see whole new classes of applications that previously we wouldn't have attempted? Or are we just gonna take existing applications and move them a little bit closer to the point of consumption? Or what will be
it's going to be a mixture of both. When we started this journey 5 years ago, Mike, it's like everybody thought it was going to be autonomous cars, and we know where that is now, right? I mean, eventually that is going to be the application of choice, but it's not currently. And where we've found demand is really in three places. One of them are enterprises that have, that are on their cloud journey, have moved a bunch of workloads to the cloud, but still have substantial workloads locked on the premises because they have to be there for performance or security reasons. And they want to get out of the data center business. They don't want to buy more equipment. They typically don't have hyperscale class data centers. And so, upgrading to really beefy GPU based servers and stuff isn't really an option. And like I said, they want to get out that work off the premises. And they also want to consume things as a service, right? That's the new model. And when you're buying the hardware and licensing the software, it's just a headache that most enterprises are trying to get away from. And then you've got on the provider side, these companies that either deliver traditional applications that can only run on premises, like factory robotics or video surveillance. They now want to be in the business of offering this as a service because they believe they grow their addressable market by doing so, and they create more convenience for the customer and a differentiation while their competitors are trying to catch up. So those are the existing applications. And then, of course, there are new applications. There's things that, people that have applied their ingenuity to the cloud can now bring it to a new class of workloads that can only be delivered from the edge, but they can use all of the cloud and cloud native capabilities that they've, developed expertise in.
In that case, if everything is eventually becoming a cloud, do we need to use the term cloud computing anymore? Or we're just going to go back to something old-fashioned like distributed enterprise computing and go from there?
Well, I think we're always going to call it cloud because maybe there'll be something else, right? In fact, we're a co-founder of an organization called the Open Grid Alliance, and we think the cloud or all this compute should operate like a fungible fabric where you just have a workload and you pass it off and it figures out where to run. And that's a vision. So maybe that'll be called something else. But today the cloud is so important. I mean, think of, and I wouldn't try to upset that term. But one thing I do think we'll stop doing is we'll stop talking about edge as if it's something different. It'll just be the internet.
As we go along, where does 5G then fit in this whole equation? Is that going to drive a whole new class of requirements, or what's your sense of?
Well, yeah. So delivering 5G networks is a very, very excellent application for infrastructure at the edge, like the kinetic grid. In fact, we've specifically designed our platform to support what's called the 7.2 split in 5G, which is sort of the open RAN, and that's where everything's running as software, essentially, but you split up the pieces. And so you think about like this old baseband unit to have all this complexity and technology, and then radio head that all this. Now they piece these apart into mostly software, not these dedicated appliances. And with our model, because we're sub 100 microseconds to the premises or to the tower with the small cell on it or to the macro cell, we can drive a 5G radio from the infrastructure with nothing but the radio out in the field, which is really novel in use and changes the economics, because now the economics of densifying a 5G network first on shared infrastructure, right? So you're not paying for the whole thing yourself; you're sharing it across multiple delivery, vendors delivering different services, and the fact that it's already built. Right, so time to market, it's already built at the density you need, and I think it's going to be pretty game changing. In terms of the capabilities, though, private networks, which often is private wireless, private 5G, are very important to a lot of these new applications. I'll give you an example. So you go into a city like Las Vegas, where we have a large kinetic grid. There's maybe, 70 7-Elevens and, 150 McDonald's. I'm making this up, but there's a lot of stores like that. Now let's imagine that McDonald's wants to roboticize their back of house, which they are planning to do. And maybe 7-Eleven wants to do automated checkout. So automated checkout requires like a camera every couple feet on the ceiling. So it's like 75 cameras in a 7-Eleven in order to do automated checkout. Well, where is that compute going to go, right? So it's a bad idea to store it at the store because like it's a threat vector, and you have to do truck rolls and go to every store. So you want to start pulling some of that into more consolidated locations. So you could potentially serve 20 7-Elevens from one location on the Kinetic Grid as opposed to just one, and reuse those resources. The other thing with the 5G is in an existing building, it's actually costly to install cameras. The cabling is often pretty complex, and like a school campus or shopping mall, getting wired cameras up is a pain. But if you drop in a 5G hub on a private network, you can put 5G cameras in pretty easily, just anywhere you want. And so 5G is becoming a conduit for a lot of these services, but it's not essential. I mean, we take fiber to the premises. I mean, that's what actually happens. That's where the data goes across. But then there's if there's a 5G network, it's typically a private 5G network that then is assisting some particular use case, like controlling, connecting all the machines to the Kinetic Grid, or connecting all the cameras to the Kinetic Grid.
How small can the Kinetic Grid get? I mean, you described a container. So do I put a container in the neighborhood, or can I get
so we deploy. No, that's a great question. No, that's a great question. So there's a lot of elements to that, right? There's permitting, there's noise ordinances, there's especially when you're going into a neighborhood, and so we had to account for all those things, and we have different sizes. So we have three basic models today. We have a VEM 180, which is 180 kilowatts. That's a big one. That's the size of a shipping container. It's not a shipping container, but essentially like that size. And we have a VEM 160, which is almost that big. And then we have a VEM 20. And VEM 20 is fitness parking space. And so they're relatively small. They're relatively easy for us to deploy. They're comparatively less expensive. They're easier to permit. In fact, one of the most amazing things is that we can stand one of these up in 3 to 6 hours. So that is how we get to 32 markets. 26 of our markets don't have data centers in them yet. They have everything else. They've got the utility, the permitting, the foundation, the fiber, everything. And we just drop the data center on a truck and crane it onto the site. And a few hours later, it's ready for customer equipment.
What's to stop somebody with a forklift just coming along and picking the thing up and driving?
We bolt it to the. I mean, it's hurricane rated. It's bolted to the. We have security cameras. Yeah, these are designed to be run lights out with no personnel on site, and they're often in a compound that has security fencing and things like that. Think like the base of a cell tower or something like that.
How do people get started? What's the thing that you see them doing first, and what's the thing you wish people wouldn't do? So it makes you shake your head.
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, every use case is different, and it's a lot of what we do today is we help our partners and customers figure out how to bring new services to market. So there's no one answer to that. I would say that there's a kind of a clever answer though that I'll give, which is to change your way of thinking, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of providers of really interesting services that are still locked into this old way of thinking. They think of like interconnection, like what happens in regional data centers. And there's only like 12 places in the US where you can do, meaningful interconnection onto the internet. Well, no, it should be thousands of places. It should be out at the edge. It should be machine speed. And so once you start thinking of these capabilities being available, it opens up, the imagination to, wondrous use cases. But I think there's like this inertia that the industry has, which is to, consider to use the old patterns as opposed to adopting the new patterns.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. There might be a very tasteful, artful box in your neighborhood soon. May look like artwork for all you know, but inside it will be a data center. Hey, Matt, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, Mike, appreciate it a lot.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live on opening day of the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit. As I mentioned earlier, I'm calling this opening day, but really the opening day was yesterday. Linux Foundation used to have this concept of 0 day, which is a bad term to use.
It is.
For the day before the opening, when you did a lot of the affiliate conferences. They didn't use the term 0 day this time. They had another day.
For some reason.
They had another, I think it was called Affiliate Day or something. But anyway, one of the big ones was the Open Source Security Foundation. And we had a bunch of people from there yesterday, some today. I'm happy to be joined now by Josh Bressers, who's also a security person, I imagine.
Yep, that's right.
Very involved with OSSF. And Josh, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Awesome, thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Josh. I'm the Vice President of Security at a company called Anchor. We do supply chain things. Our two open source projects many people have heard of are called Sift and Gripe. We can talk about those a little later, maybe. But then I'm also a member of the Technical Advisory Council at the OpenSSF, and I've been involved in open source security for more than 20 years at this point. It's been, way back in the early days. Mm-hmm. And I have a couple of podcasts I do. I do the Hacker History podcast, which is a ton of fun. I'm always looking for guests, so if anyone watching is interested, let me know.
How did they reach out to you for that?
For the Hacker History? Oh, so there's a little conference in Wisconsin. I live in Wisconsin, and there's a HackerCon called CypherCon.
Really?
And
I don't know that one.
I've known the organizers for many, many years. And one day the organizer, the guy in charge, Matt Getzman, his name is, he comes to me and says, "Hey, I want you to bring your open source security podcast, which is another podcast I have, into CypherCon." And I said, "I don't want to do that because I like to be able to do whatever I want. No one's in charge of me, right? I have no sponsors. It's all self-funded." And he said, "Well, I want you to do something with me then, right?" And so I said, "Okay, let me think about it." And I come back to him maybe a month later and I said, "I want to do a podcast where I just sit down with people and they tell me their story, right, about whatever it is they want to talk about and kind of how they got to where they are. It's super fun." And I said, "I want to call it Hacker History Podcast." And he says, "Do you know I own the domain hackerhistory.com?" And I'm like, "What?
No,
That's
that was
ridiculous."
fate. Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing it for about a year now with them. And yeah, as we get guests, we put them on.
What a lucky thing that he had.
I love it.
So, there's a term, it's a Yiddish word, I think, called Bersheret, which means it's just bound to happen. It's like
there
fate.
you go. Yep.
So that is Bersheret.
Indeed.
It's interesting.
Indeed.
So we've got Hacker History, then we've got the Open Source Security Podcast.
Yep, that's right.
And your title with Anchor?
Vice President of Security.
Excellent.
We're a small startup company, so I do all kinds of stuff with them.
I remember so when you're old. I remember the day Anchor launched. I think we covered it at DevOps.com or Container Journal. I'm trying to remember who the CEO was that I interviewed. It had to be in the last 6-7 years, no? I mean,
it's been right around 5 years. You probably talked to Saeed as the CEO.
Yep.
And Anchor's gone through kind of a couple of changes just related to the industry, because you figure back in the early days, it was all about vulnerabilities, right? Yep. And now today, through just kind of the process of evolution, it's the broader supply chain story, not just focused on vulnerabilities. And so it's been a ton of fun getting to kind of go through a lot of these changes and experience it and make a difference as well, which I love.
You talk about being in open source security for 20 years.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, this evolution, is so true, right? So I started a security company in 2001, 2003, maybe 2004. We come out with a vulnerability assessment tool called VAM. I was the chief strategy officer, BizDev Corp. I did everything, as many of us do at startups, right?
Right.
The marketing, product, sales. But I used to go out to our enterprise customers and talk to them about, and they used to call our VAM, our vulnerability assessment tool, the bad news generator, right? Because it just made bad news.
It's kind of true.
It was. But I remember back then, what a struggle. And this was scanning for vulnerabilities in deployed software and in deployed infrastructure.
That's right. And services and things like that, right? Yeah.
Just to get them to do it once a year, or to move from once a year to a quarterly scan was like, it was like, sweating bullets. Mm-hmm. We didn't even think about, hey, maybe someone should scan this software before we deploy it and put it out there into the world, right? That whole AppSec thing sort of burst on the scene maybe a little later.
Yep.
Then we started scanning that, but it was, you want to know that, I mean, all right, you had pen testing, you had vulnerability scanning, you had app scanning, but it was still kind of that same looking for known vulnerabilities, or maybe we were fuzzing and doing things like that. The whole concept of viewing it as a supply chain issue and applying, you know, manufacturing kind of outlooks, whether it's lean or demi kind of stuff, to this idea of, hey, we've got a manufacturing process for software, and we have a supply chain for software, and we need to secure or apply security controls at points along the supply chain. I mean, you said it, Josh, you said it just rolled off your tongue like it was, you know.
Well, I mean,
but it's a relatively new, concept to think of it like that.
Though. So I spent a decade at Red Hat. I started there in 2004, and I spent 12 years at the company.
Okay.
And my job when I started there was functionally supply chain security. We didn't call it that.
But I was just going to say, no one called it that because we didn't think of it as
exactly. And the attitude was that Red Hat was the vendor, and everything behind Red Hat was Red Hat's problem to take care of, and everything, and then the customer was paying Red Hat to make all those problems go away.
Right.
And in many ways they did, and I think Red Hat brought a lot of legitimacy to open source that didn't exist prior,
doubt.
Right? And so they spent literally decades building trust and goodwill for open source, and then we saw companies like Google come along, and you have GitHub and Microsoft. I mean, heck, Microsoft. When I started at Red Hat, Microsoft was the enemy. Like there was, I remember I would
Evil empire.
I would pick fights with them on purpose at conferences just because I could, and it was ridiculous.
It wasn't ridiculous. I was there. I believe it.
Well, I was ridiculous. Okay, but now.
But they had it coming. They were awful arrogant. Let's face it.
I won't argue with you.
Okay.
But we had all of this work that happened, and I think now what's happened is the world realized the power of open source. They realized all of the advantages they get, how fast they can move by incorporating these projects that are already done. And so now in many instances, they've just said, well, we don't need a company to vet this for us. Now we're just going to go right to the source and we're going to use it. But the problem is, and in fact, this was talked about in the keynote earlier today, is their vetting costs money, right? If you just take the raw open source and you try to consume it, this is where you start running into issues. And this is why we're seeing all these supply chain topics now, because you can't just like take open source. You can't do an NPM install and forget about it forever, right? That doesn't work. So it happens a lot. But now we're seeing all these tools that are able to look at what's happening and understand, like, what are you shipping? What is in your stuff? What matters to you? What is important? Because I think one of the other things I love is something like Log4j comes along. And Log4j is, the world's ending, holy cow, it's Christmas time, everyone, like, haha, you're working over the holiday.
Right.
And we all suffered through it, and we all made it through. And then the obsession became, okay, we have to look for Log4j. But in many instances, there's other things in your infrastructure, there's other things in your products that matter. But what are those? And we don't always have insight into that. And so this is what makes me so excited with all the work I see at OpenSSF and the Linux Foundation in general and all the products going on. I mean, there's going to be a room full of vendors upstairs that are all working on this problem together. And so now it's about starting to figure out, what do we have? Like in the case where you were working with a vendor like Red Hat knew what they had because they hired a bunch of people like me, and it was just through suffering and hard work that we figured it out. We had
literally forcing it.
We literally had text files because humans were looking through packages, and that obviously doesn't scale.
Right.
And so now it's all about how can we use tooling and obviously open source to understand our open source. And so it's really exciting.
That's what I'm saying. It's a brave new world out there.
Absolutely.
Two things though that you mentioned I want to dig in on. So let's take Log4j for instance.
Yeah.
Right? To me, this is a classic supplier and a supply chain issue where it was so good at what it was intended to do that it was the only game in town. If you wanted to do this, you used Log4j.
That's right.
And so the same way when we found out all of our masks came from China, and when China couldn't send us masks, we had no masks with COVID.
That's right.
Right? I don't know how like there's arguments to be made on either side of that. How do you broaden your supply or supply chain for critical, if you want to call it a critical component? If it's so widely used in all this software, to me, that's a critical component.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you make sure we're not all dependent on the same critical component? Because, look, defects are going to happen.
Absolutely. Yep.
No one does it on purpose. It happens.
That's right.
And so when they happen in the future, number one, we want to correct them as quickly as we can.
Yep.
But how do we stop it from affecting 90% of or whatever the number is of what's out there? That's number one. My second question is, that's great for the Log4js and those rock stars who have achieved monopoly status or whatever you want to call it. But what about, as I was talking with Justin Hutchings, right, a little earlier, he calls it the Nebraska Project, right? Two guys in Nebraska see a problem, they come up with a solution, they open source it. Some university uses it here. Someone's son who works at Microsoft gets it. They decide to, and before you know it, it has a nice little cottage following, right? It becomes a cottage industry.
Yep.
It's not Log4j.
That's right.
It's way down here. But how do we maintain the integrity of that too?
So this is a marvelous question, and this is something I've been doing a bunch of research on. So I worked at Elastic prior to coming to Anchor, and so Elastic has Elasticsearch, which is for processing huge volumes of data, and I've become obsessed with data. Anyone who knows me knows, like, at some point in the conversation, I'm going to ask, show me your data. Right. Anytime they talk about anything. And so one of the things I'm doing is I've taken all of the NPM data, and I've been looking at it to understand, like, what does the ecosystem look like? Like, I want to see it, right? It's not enough to just talk about, and a lot of this is guesses from smart people, which they're not always wrong, but if you look at the NPM ecosystem...
right either, but
Yes. But if you look at the NPM ecosystem and you look at just, say, the top 1,000 packages, half of those have only one maintainer. And when I say top 1,000, I mean by downloads, right? Like the most downloaded packages. Half of them have one maintainer, right? Which when you learn that, it's a terrifying number. And so there's a lot of talk about we have to understand our open source and we should be careful and it's risky to use one maintainer projects and all of this. And I think what the data is showing me is that you can say a one maintainer project is risky, but a one maintainer project is reality, right? You can, risky or not, is what we have.
It's just,
right?
That's
just
the
is.
tiger's stripes,
exactly.
and
you're
not going to change the stripes.
That's right. And so this is where I think our challenge now is partially understanding what we have, and this is where we need the tooling and the data, and we need people to actually look at what's going on instead of making crap up. And then we have to say, okay, this is the world we live in. How do we work within the confines of this world? Because I hear a lot of people saying, oh, every project needs 2 maintainers or 5 maintainers or whatever. But the reality is when you have 1.9 million NPM projects, of which like 1.6 million have one maintainer, we're not going to find 1.6 million maintainers to work on this.
That's a lot of volunteers.
That's right. There's
but
just
you know
no
what?
way.
So again, I discussed this a bit with Justin. He called it the one bus problem. In terms of that maintainer gets hit by a bus, does the whole project die?
Right. Maybe,
you know what?
Probably.
The sad truth is, yeah. Because I agree with you. The amount of open source projects that rise to commercial viability, we were talking security before, the Snorts, the Nessuses, the Nmaps, these kinds of, the amount of those projects that rise to that level versus the 1.9 million mass here is probably not even 1%. It's 0.01 of 1%.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And so the other 99.8% or whatever it is, you're not gonna, you can't go to the local Home Depot and find some people hanging around and say, hey, you want to be a maintainer today? Jump in the truck.
That's right.
Right? We're here in Texas. But, this, and I think for us to think that part of the OSSF, or in fact the Linux Foundation's charter is to somehow change that, I think that's just shoveling sand against the tide.
I mean, sort of. I think it's a very large problem, but I also think we need someone to care. right?
I think a lot of people care. But to say, I'm going to get 2 maintainers or 3 maintainers for every project, you're kidding yourself.
No, I agree. I don't
Can
think
we
that's the
automate
answer.
something here?
Yep, exactly that. And I think that those are the spaces that we're going to have to investigate for the future. I think trying to brute force it by just saying, but again, this is, I think that kind of crap smart people made up category of saying, oh, every project should have 2 maintainers. Like, should they?
Sounds great.
Sign me up. Show me how that matters. And I think you can make the argument. If we look at like the Linux kernel is easy, right? Linux kernel has literally hundreds and thousands of developers. You could say, oh, look at how successful it is. It's successful because they have all these developers. But is it? Like, we don't know. We think so.
Well, it's coming to a desktop near you this year.
This
is the year.
Right. It's always the year. I love it.
I'm kidding you.
I've been using, don't laugh. I've been using Linux on my desktop since probably, 1999 maybe, give or take. And yeah,
it's always been the year.
Every year.
But no, seriously, again, Linux. Linux is the 0.0001 of open source projects, right?
Absolutely.
It's a one of a kind. It's a unique unicorn.
That's right.
For us to say, look, our best practice is every open source project should have 3 maintainers and at least 12 core contributors, and we're striving for a community, and no knock on the Linux Foundation, they do an amazing job, but that's part of what they do with the sandbox and the graduated and the all of the different levels of incubated, all the different levels here, right? Those are some of the metrics that matter, but not every, what did you say, 1.9 million projects are.
And that's just NPM. That's one ecosystem.
Right. So I think we need to be more practical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And say, hey, if you're a 1 maintainer project, this town ain't big enough for both of us. These are some best practices you should follow that can ensure the continuity and security of your project.
Sure.
And list them out. I'm just one person giving you my opinion. But
right. No, I agree.
I think that's better than trying to change the universe.
Absolutely. I think it's trying to work within the constraints of what we have. But now, on the other side of this, Log4j wasn't a one-person project.
No, it wasn't.
It was part of the Apache Foundation.
That was.
That's right. And so even when you have a foundation backing a project,
it could still happen.
Crazy things happen. Absolutely.
Well, because I think the lesson is, as I said before, there's always defects in software.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's never going away.
You can't. It's the nature of that beast. We've seen it over and over again, and it happens in open source. It happens in non-open source. It's software. That's what it is. Yep. Hey, I want to return a little bit. I know we're rambling on here. We're probably way over, but let's talk about the 2 anchor projects you mentioned early on.
Yeah, definitely.
They're paying you. They gave you the shirt.
That's right.
We got to give them some due.
So
what did they do?
Sift and Gripe. They're open source projects. Sift is an SBOM scanner. The idea is you point Sift at a container, a directory, kind of whatever you have, and it will try to figure out what's happening inside of your project. So for example, I point it at a container, it'll show me like my NPM modules installed, it'll show me the RPMs installed in the container, it'll show me other things it might find, and it outputs an SBOM. And this is, CycloneDX or SPDX are the 2 standards. And then once you have your SBOM, what do you do with it? Right? That's part of the question. Is obviously there's always this talk of SBOM. Oh, you need an SBOM. Everyone needs an SBOM. Yeah. And it's like, it feels like the fish at the end of Finding Nemo where they get in the water. Like, now what? Right? They're stuck in the bags. So this is where kind of Gripe comes in. Gripe is a vulnerability scanner where you can take an SBOM and you feed the SBOM into Gripe, and then Gripe will look at all the contents from your SBOM.
So it's not even a vulnerability scanner. It's almost, it is a vulnerability scanner, but it's not actually scanning your software.
Well, it can, but scanning SBOMs is better. Because here's the thing. When you scan software, you have to look and do your inspections, right?
And you got to hope it's reachable and it's there and all that.
Well, but now if you have an SBOM, you can usually, we'll call it scan the SBOM very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
And so the idea being that when you generate an SBOM, the contents of your container don't change, right? But once vulnerabilities do, because there's always new vulnerabilities every day, right? Like I could scan something right now, and in 10 minutes, there could be a new finding.
It's only good for that moment.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Started Still Secure, the company with VAM. In 2006, we came out with a product called Safe Access, which was one of the first, what became known as NAC, Network Access Control. And there we were working with the federal government, DOD and stuff. And there when you logged on, we had to make a split-second decision whether you were compliant. You can't do a scan.
No, definitely
It
not.
didn't work. So what we were doing is we were looking if you were a Windows box, and was it .io config or whatever it was.
I don't know. I haven't run Windows in years.
Me either. Was it IO config?
That sounds like something they would have, but
no, there was a Linux equivalent because Linux was really easy to scan because there you had all your packages.
Right.
So you didn't really scan, just like you don't really scan the SBOM. You read the SBOM, and based on what's on the SBOM, you know what has a patch, what version, what needs to be done. It was the same thing. It wasn't IO config. I'm really old. I'm sorry. IO config might have been like IBM OS 2 or something, but it was your registry files in Windows. They had the registry,
right?
And so you could look in the registry, and it would tell you everything, every version number, theoretically everything, and you can make in a half a second where you are. We use your antivirus up to date, whatever, and that's how we did that versus a full-blown scan, which oftentimes we would do after we let you on.
Sure.
As a secondary thing, right? Just kind of belt and suspenders.
Yeah.
It's the same thing here with SBOMs.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's my question to you. They say the average lifespan of a container is mere seconds or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use these products and still be successful when these containers are coming and going like that?
So this is where when you use something like Kubernetes, they have this concept called an admission controller.
Right.
So what happens is you can't do this with Sift and Gripe by themselves. There's some people who've built some other projects around them, but then obviously there's a lot of enterprise, like the Anchor Enterprise product does this as well, and there's others. But you scan your container, you get your SBOM, you store your SBOM, you conduct whatever, we'll say due diligence on that container SBOM you need to do as part of your policy, and then it basically has like a go or no-go from the policy engine. And so in the Kubernetes admission controller, it can phone home and say, hey, I'm about to run this container, am I good? And it'll just be like, yep, we're fine with that one. Or it can say, nope, not that one, like don't let it run. And it's very, very fast, and it works really well.
Cool.
Yep, it is very cool.
Where can people get more information on that?
I go to anchor.com.
Can you spell it for them?
I can, ANCHORE.com. I know there's...
I was pulling it out of you.
It's all good.
Josh, anything else you want to share with our audience? What do you think so far of the event?
I'm loving it. I haven't been anywhere in a long time.
I hear you.
It's been a wild couple of years, and I'm ecstatic. I've got a couple of talks coming up, and I am the sort of person that thrives with an audience versus staring at my computer screen for a webinar. So I'm ecstatic to have people in seats I get to interact with, and it's going to be a treat, I think. And
absolutely.
I feel like there's a ton of great people at this show. It's been a lot of fun. I got in yesterday, and I'm loving it. It's a blast so far.
Cool, man. Hey, for those watching this live at home, the event there's a virtual twin to it. And you can check Josh out live if you go over to Linux Foundation Open Source Summit and sign up. I think it's free, the virtual.
I do not know the answer to that.
Me either, but I'm hoping.
Anyway, it'll all be on YouTube at some point in the near future.
I hope so. Well, this will be too.
Awesome.
Well, actually, this is on YouTube now. There might be people watching it on YouTube
Fantastic.
right this second, but it'll be on as well later. Anyway, hey Josh, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
It was a great conversation.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back here live at the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit in just a moment.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live at RSA. Last day coverage. We're coming up around noon, I guess, or a little before. It's still kind of quiet in West today. I'm wondering if a lot of people have gone home already or they're all on the expo floor, which seems to go on forever. Anyway, our next guest is from Orca Security. Orca is a company, of course, we cover extensively on Techstrong TV, Security Boulevard, DevOps.com. We usually have Avi Schuler, their CEO, with us. Avi's a friend. But today we're very happy to have Gil Yaron with us. Gil, I didn't even ask you what your title was.
I'm the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Orca Security.
There we go, CPO co-founder. Gil, this is your first time. It's usually Avi, as I said. So welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Look, most of our audience does know Orca, right? We cover them a lot. But we may be, there's a lot of people just coming in for the RSA coverage, and maybe they don't. So why don't we talk a little bit about Orca, if you don't mind?
Sure. So for those that are not familiar with Orca, Orca is a cloud security platform. We've created an agentless approach to provide full visibility into your cloud.
Yep.
It means that you can get full coverage of vulnerabilities, malware, PII, misconfiguration, lateral movement risk, and basically anything that you need in terms of understanding what you have in the cloud and what are the risks that poses that.
Excellent. And I just want to mention that also my good friend Andy Ellis is an advisor to Orca and talked to. I saw Andy actually last night, and we spoke a little bit about Orca. But anyway, so Gil, RSA is where the world comes to meet security. Orca is here. Well, actually, I'm trying to think. I think I interviewed Avi about a month ago, not even less, about some new features coming out that were pretty exciting. But what new news here at the RSA have you come up with?
So during RSA, we've showed our customers or prospects, we've showed them our new approach for shift left, and basically how we are able to combine what's being built as part of the pipeline and what will be the impact in production when it is deployed. But the cool thing is it also allows attribution from production to the shift left, to the CI/CD. So let's say, for example, if you have an issue in production and you want to know who should fix it, because you have that visibility into that pipeline, you can understand which team is responsible, how it will affect them. In addition to that, we've released additional features in our attack path. For those who doesn't know, Orca has the ability to simulate and to calculate attack path into your organization.
Yep.
It means that when you'll be able to understand what is the potential path and what are the risks that an attacker might use in order to reach and breach your crown jewels.
Yeah. So let's talk about this a little, right? I've been in security 25 years, right? There's definitely a demarcation zone, a DMZ. Yeah, DMZ is a bad word because it has other uses. But there's a line, kind of like the blood-brain barrier between security post-deployment and shift left security pre-deployment. And up until kind of like the advent of DevSecOps and these kinds of things, they were very different, right? Even in AppSec. AppSec was about WAF, right? Which was after you deployed, you had your web app firewall, and then you would do your external pen testing, right? Using, one of the open source tools or a white hat or something like that, right? With DevSecOps and shift left, we started doing not pen testing, but we started doing security testing prior to deployment. From what you're describing now, Orca's kind of crossed that barrier and is doing not just post-deployment security, but pre-deployment security as well.
I think one of the major concerns of most security teams is whether they will be able to compete with the amount of tasks, the amount of risks they have in the organization. So prioritization is one factor in being able to do that.
Yep.
Automation and orchestration is another factor. And obviously shift left is another factor in the fact that you can alleviate some of the work that you have towards the DevOps, towards the engineers. But the thing is that as we see it, it's still not enough, meaning you still need, when you're asking engineers to do something, you need to have enough context of what will be that impact in production.
Yes.
And so instead of just looking, for example, on the CVSS score, you can look, I have a Docker that is going to be deployed in production. In production, it's going to be internet facing. So I have a policy for that. I have a policy that...
Just for internal facing.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that, and this is kind of bread and butter DevOps, is the concept of feedback loops, which is saying, okay, I've got this in deployment. Here are things I'm seeing. Here are things I've discovered. And I need to feedback that into the development, the DevOps teams, so that we could fix it in the next iteration, in the next release. Sounds a little bit you're doing that here, right? And this is, strengthening that feedback loops, which is really, again, that's one of the core principles of this. So, good to hear that. You're the second cloud native, cloud security company I've spoken to just today. When you're out there, in the masses of humanity here at RSA, how many companies are really truly cloud first versus companies that are still talking about it but not really moved into the cloud?
So I think that that obviously the tech companies that were born in the last decades are
They're
mostly cloud first.
Cloud.
I am in terms of every other company, the vast majority, I would say at least 80%, have hybrid environments, have still on-prem, have a bit on cloud. I just had an interesting conversation yesterday with one of our prospects, and he said, "I'm here because I discovered I have cloud and I don't know what to do." And I asked him how that happened. He said, "We got a message from AWS saying that we have a breached machine in our cloud." And I said, "We don't have a cloud." And then he went and found out that they have not one but several environments in the cloud that were born as part of what happened during COVID, because during that time people were not in the office, some policies were not enforced as strictly as they were prior to COVID, and then people were pushed to the cloud. And now when you have business in the cloud, it's very difficult to get out of it because it's so much more effective and so much easier to use.
Well, no one ever goes out of the cloud once they're in, right? But this is a perfect example, right? I remember, this reminds me when I was selling, I co-founded a security company in 2001. We used to sell a lot to the government, U.S. Army, Navy, Marines. I'm in an Army base, and on U.S. Army bases, their CISO is like I think it's called a Duma or something like that. I forgot what they call it. Anyway, there's a name. But I'm walking with this guy in his base, and I said, "What are you doing about wireless security?" He said, "Wireless security?" He said, "Sir, we are very secure against wireless because we don't allow any wireless." I said, "Oh." And as he's telling me that, I'm watching people at their desk throw their WAPs under their desk so the guy doesn't see. And as we walk by, they take them back out. And the whole place is wireless. If someone would have walked around with a scanner, they would have picked up wireless all over the place. So it's the same thing with cloud now, right? We used to call it shadow IT, all that. I think during COVID, we've seen this happen, right?
I think many of these companies move to the cloud regardless as part of their process, but there were also some that
official thing.
And it's actually tools like Orca, which are agentless, easy to deploy, are actually a perfect tool for these cases, because when you talk, for example, with a large bank, if you'll ask them what's their strategy 5 years from now, they will still tell you that 80 or 90% of their environment is going to be on-prem. And so
not true, right? But it's not the truth. They're all moving to cloud. They have to, because their customers demand it.
Yes.
So anyway, Gil, what else? Anything else we could share with the audience?
Yeah, so as you started mentioning, as part of remediation, as part of moving items from production to fix as part of the shift left, we've also released quite a few tools for automatic remediation. The way we segment it is proactive and reactive.
Right.
If you'll think about it, when you have something that is wrong in your cloud and you want to remediate, then you'll have a reactive remediation. You will change the configuration. You will automatically try to fix the problem in production. But in many cases, you cannot do it, but you need to have a proactive approach, meaning that you have, let's say, an S3 bucket open to the internet. So it's not great, but at least I don't want any more
Absolutely.
of these next time. And so I can apply a shift left policy or infrastructure policy that will deny additional changes in S3 buckets, or to deploy additional S3 buckets which are open to the internet, and then start enforcing from now on and have a more proactive approach of how to secure the future.
Excellent, man. Gil, we didn't mention, most people go walkersecurity.com.
So please go visit our website. We have at orca.security.com. We have a free trial as well. You can onboard, you can scan and see the results for yourselves. It helped a lot of organizations, especially during Log4j and other incidents.
Yeah.
So feel free to use it and try it out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gil. Say hello to Avi and to everyone at Orca, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. We're here live. We're at RSA. We are going to get our next guest mic'd up, and we'll be back in just a little bit.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. I know I sure did. We had a fantastic lineup full of great interviews with guests to give you the latest info on the tech industry. From our extensive coverage at conferences today to our episode of View with Vizard, we had a lot of great content. We'll be back again on Thursday, so we hope to see you there then. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.